Hey everyone, welcome back to the discussion on Triune relationships with Pastor Bob Garment. One of the things we did have to do for this particular discussion was split up the actual intro that took place when we did the interview. When you get three friends together and haven't been together in so long, a lot can happen, like a 45-minute introduction. So we did not want to post the entire introduction. There were more jokes than content, believe me, trust me on that. It's kind of what happens when we all get together. So what we decided to do is split the intro over the parts so you can see exactly how we do things backwards in real life, #true story. So join us now for part 2 with the actual intro for Pastor Bob Garment.
Normally it's just Triune and I, but today we decided to bring in an expert.
You got to say his whole expert name.
Where's all of that at?
The magic miracle.
Oh, I'm not doing all of that.
No?
I don't even know what all the M's stand for.
We're going to tell you. We tell you every time.
Missing.
So today we're going to be joined by Pastor Robert Garment. We know him as Pastor Bob. We know him as the magical, miracle making, praying. He's a very, very good friend of ours and a very, very impactful part of our lives.
Absolutely.
And so he will be joining us to discuss the Triune God, to discuss the roles of men and women in marriage. And I'm really excited about this.
And he's here for me because...
Told you she'd show up.
I let you do your part.
As soon as I get started,
I'm
she just
excited
pops
to
up.
have you on the podcast because you started out as one of my favorite instructors and became such a wonderful friend. We talk about how we met all the time in the hallway that day, and we just knew that we'd never separate ever again. And you have been so impactful and influential on our ministry and things that we have been working on, including the podcast. We love having these discussions with you, so we decided we wanted to have them with other people as well. As much as you helped us to create our book, this is one of the titles that is inside of the book, one of the chapters, and we wanted to expound on it, but have you join us for that. Welcome to For This Reason. I'm Bird.
And I'm Fish of BNF Ministry.
Thank you for joining us today as we further discuss God's definition of marriage then
And how it still applies to us today.
We hope this time together is enjoyable and educational.
Nah,
Yeah, no.
let's just have a good time.
It's something that you said that I wanted to go back to. I had a thought on where you said Jesus says, I only say what my Father tells me to say. And looking at that from a marriage perspective, I have a rule for myself when I'm dealing with outside people. And, they're like, hey, you guys want to do XYZ? Or, you should come over. Well, let me talk to Daryl about that. I've heard some people kind of link that together as in, well, you're only going to say what the father and who represents the father in marriage supposedly is the husband. I feel it's God himself. If we look at it as the triune, it's not about going to get permission from Daryl, but we speak the same language as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So for me, if I'm not sure of what he would say, meaning we haven't had this conversation before, this is probably something new territory. Let me go check with Daryl. That's not me looking for permission, but that's looking for the like-mindedness. Where are we on this topic?
But you take that and you talk about mutual submission. You ask me, and the first question I ask is, well, do you want to go?
He puts it right back.
It is a constant, circular discussion. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go? Because if you don't want to go, then I have no interest in going.
And what's funny about that is Jesus said a lot without having to preface it with what Dad said. Dad said. But that's because he can confidently speak on what he knows through relationship. So there are times when I can answer on behalf of both of us because I'm confident on how we both feel about a thing. Or we already have an agreement that if this comes up, this is what we will do. Mm-hmm. But it's not about going to look for permission. I didn't take that as Jesus was going to go back to God and say, hey, can I say this? Or Dad, is it all right if I, do you want me to tell this part? When we commune, I then learn his will and then I convey.
Well, I think it's important to understand too that when Jesus was the incarnate God in this world, mm-hmm. and he said to those who listened to him in this world, who just looked at him and said, this is just a guy. He says, yeah, I know, but I will never tell you anything that doesn't come from our Father in heaven.
Right.
Because in that situation, and mutual submission even, it kind of swings back and forth with the situation. Jesus was basically saying what he said to the rich young ruler who said, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he says, why do you call me good? Only God is good. Mm-hmm. And so he's reasserting that I'm only telling you that which is good. And the only thing that's truly good comes from the holy God who is outside this broken mm-hmm. and sin-sick world. Now, does that apply directly to marriage? Well, in your case, of course, because Daryl is holy, and you are contaminated by this world.
You two.
Nothing.
Can't tell that you two are friends, huh?
This is going to cost them a really expensive dinner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which I will gladly buy.
The tab is growing.
Now, here's the difference, though, in marriage. We'd love to talk because that tainted sinful nature that's still a part of us mm-hmm. really does not like the word authority.
Yes, that would be me.
and if people listening to this are going to say, is this the ruler husband again? Mm-hmm. Well, the husband ruling over his wife is part of the curse. But the responsibility of the husband for the wife is pre-curse. Yeah. Because who had to fill in Eve on everything Adam had learned from God about this world? Adam did. Did that mean that Adam felt like he was a superior creature? Not at all. Mm-hmm. Because in a perfect sin-free world, you see what Paul is teaching in Ephesians come to life. Are we jumping around the Bible enough for you here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They go together.
Because when you get into Ephesians 5 into 6, remember that when it says, wives, submit to your husband, the word submit is not in the Greek.
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it doesn't apply. But to go back to the end of the previous statement, that's talking to the church, saying, yes. Therefore, submit one to another.
But of course they leave that part out when they're preaching on wives.
But then you get the next part. he just specifies wives. And how do we submit to one another? Wives, to your husbands. Mm-hmm. Let them support them in their responsibility to lead and care for and provide and protect the family. But husbands, your submission comes directly to submitting to a love that God has given you for your wife. Mm-hmm. You have to love her like Christ loved the church and, fill in the blank, gave himself up for her. Right. Now, it doesn't mean you abdicate. But what it means is that Daryl, on his good days at least, sees you as more important than he is.
That took some getting used to. I probably would not have understood that if I had known you about 10 years ago. But that was one of the things that really took me a while. I thought it was fake. I thought he was just trying to be on his best behavior. Mm-hmm. And it finally hit me that this is who he is. Maybe this is really what it's supposed to look like. He truly is concerned with what concerns me.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what it is. If it concerns me, it concerns him.
And he wants to protect every level of who you are. I mean, this is audio, not video, but if the ceiling in this room were to cave in right now, mm-hmm. he wouldn't jump to me. He would jump to cover you.
I hope. You are one of his buddies.
Well, if he has time to get you safe and then help me out, he would. Because we all love one another.
Right, yeah.
And, of course, my wife's not here for me
to jump.
So I'd probably be the top of the sandwich saying, I'll protect them both. But in marriage, his first responsibility is to cover you protectively, not authoritatively. And I'm using authoritative in the human sense.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He has the authority from God to do what is necessary to protect and provide for his family, and to fulfill his responsibility. Which brings me to one of the other phrases that you may remember. God only gives us the authority to the extent that we have responsibility.
Okay. Yeah.
If he gives me more authority than I need for my responsibility, I turn into a tyrant. If he gives me more responsibility than he does authority, then I am incapable of fulfilling my responsibility. They have to match.
Right.
So when we talk about the authority of anybody in the family or in the church or in the community, it is given only to fulfill a responsibility. And that's what goes wrong in most of our systems.
This is true because one of the things I learned coming out of my church upbringing and just learning God for myself was finding out that the way I viewed God was the way I viewed a man. So if I saw God as Zeus, then men were tyrants to me. And I didn't need that,
If you were looking for a tyrant, you had chosen poorly.
Oh, and I wasn't. So I decided not to make a choice. I'm like, I'm not getting married. This is too complicated. I'll just date for the rest of my life, and leave it at that. I can get the same results without the certificate. But when I began to really understand who God was and the word authority didn't mean what I thought. And to begin to understand that his authority comes from love first. Everything about him comes from love first. Well, that was hard to accept, but then I realized, I better go find out what love is. I really don't know what it is. I had to go find God's definition of that. Once I really understood that, it began to change my view of a man. What he should look like, what he should sound like, and what that authority does look like. And it's not, like you said, being a tyrant, but taking his responsibility seriously and being concerned about what concerns me.
But I think that's when you're looking at it from a love-based authority, you're talking about someone who is putting all of their effort and all of their energy into the well-being of someone else, esteeming them above himself. And so that is not authority just for their own good, but it's an authority primarily for your good and for the good of the union, not for the good of the person. The good of the person is secondary. So you're looking at someone who is making every decision and every thought toward how can this better her? How can this better our marriage? And even if they do reap some benefit in it, they do, but every thought is she okay? What can I do? How can I make this better? What can I do? What can I do? When you look at it that way, you understand most of us don't want that authority. Life is a lot easier when you don't have to worry about somebody else.
True.
It's painful because you don't have the companionship, and there is that part of it. But from a responsibility side, it's just me. My running joke, I tell guys all the time, if it were not for women, there would be no houses. We'd have cardboard boxes. We'd be fine. But we get houses and homes and things so that things can be painted and hung on walls, and there can be furniture and kitchens and things.
You'd still be out hunting with sticks.
Well, one of the
We would.
And eating a squirrel.
Oh, Lord. Have all the squirrels. Please, please.
Even in our English language, if you look at what the term authority actually comes from, what's the root word there? Author.
Right.
And the Bible tells us very clearly that God is the ultimate authority. And even when Jesus is talking to Pontius Pilate, said, you wouldn't have any authority over me unless my Father gave it to you.
Right.
So author, what's an author? You guys are writing a book. What's an author?
The one that writes.
The source of the story.
Right.
So who's the source of our story?
God.
It's really not Daryl or me or anyone else who exercises, or the two of you who exercise your joint authority over children. You are delegated authorities under God's authority, which means that if Daryl decides that he's going to turn into Archie Bunker or my generation, Ralph Cramden, or your older listeners. I am the king of my castle, you will do what I want, woman. And his authority is used to enslave you for his pleasure. Then, first of all, he is misusing the authority that was delegated, because what does God want for you?
Right.
To make you the totally obedient handmaiden of your sovereign king?
Absolutely not.
King Darrell?
Glory.
No,
Hallelujah.
don't shout. Don't
Thank
amen
you. I
it.
saw that hand. I got a witness. But rather, the conduit through which God says, okay, I'm going to show you in my word and by the whispering of my spirit, fog machine not needed, how to best fulfill your responsibility to your wife, to children.
Yeah.
But it's always got to reflect me. If it doesn't reflect me, you're misusing the delegated authority. You know, as a pastor, I have authority given to me by the church.
Right.
What happens if I misuse it?
Ooh.
What
We both know about
What
that.
if I use our Florida tax exempt certificate next time I buy a car and say, it's for the church?
Right.
Now that's when you get the Zeus thunderbolt. Like,
Well, I mean, because you do driving to and from and occasionally past the church, so...
and our visiting specialist on rationalizing, Daryl Hope himself.
Okay, really.
I'll be in the cell right next to yours.
Well, here's one thing I do want to do, because I know that this is important to my husband. We spent quite a bit of time on the husband. What about the wife?
Okay.
I know that it sounds like the husband has all this responsibility, all this work to make sure everybody else is okay. Sometimes that gives the impression that the wives don't have to do anything but be the queens. But
That sounds good.
it sounds good, but have you ever been queen? Because they have work to do.
Yes.
And there is a specific job for us to do. And there is a way that we are expected to not just support our husbands, but we also have work to do in keeping the work of the relationship in balance.
So what is the responsibility of the wife?
Yes.
I'm going to pretend that my wife is sitting here.
Uh-oh.
Because the way I interact with my wife may be different than the way that Daryl interacts with you. Because I am older and therefore more perfect. No. we are different men married to different women.
It's on tape.
I know.
Yeah.
That will get edited out, I'm sure. Or used for blackmail.
I'm going to say forward to this point right here, Miss Mary.
But the first thing I would ask my wife in establishing a relationship to begin with, maybe not in so many terms, but the first thing I want to know is, since I love you the way Christ loves the church, and I would lay down my life for you, how may I bless you? That's the first question I want to know. How may I bless you? What are your needs? How can I best love you?
We talked about that last week. You need to ask her.
One of the things that couples really, when I'm counseling couples, and I'll ask, the first question I ask them, almost the first, if they come to me in some sort of conflict, I'll say to the husband, I'll do this with you guys, Daryl, do you love your wife?
What day is it? Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I do.
It's the day to give the right answer.
While it's
there goes the
recorded.
book sales. And I said, Cherie, do you love your husband?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, I won't ask this of you guys and put you on the spot, but the next question I ask a couple is, I'll ask the husband, do you always feel loved by your wife? And he'll hesitate, look at her, feel guilty, and then say, not always. And I'll ask the wife the same question, do you always feel loved by your husband? No, not always. So the next question is, how is it that you both feel love for each other, but you don't feel love from each other consistently? And that's when I say, because you haven't taught each other. What makes me feel loved? What makes me feel loved? I will tell a story that Mary knows that I tell frequently when I'm talking about, and people always say, oh, you're talking about the love languages. Well, it goes deeper than that.
Thank
Much
you.
deeper than that. But when we were newly married and we were setting up housekeeping, we'd finish up dinner and maybe I'd help with dishes sometimes. But early on, I was definitely, because then I go sit on the sofa waiting for her to come snuggle. She went right from that to say, oh, the dishes are done. I can go hang curtains or do stuff to make the house look homey.
Oh, wow, this sounds so familiar right now.
And so she is thinking, why is he not doing little acts of service for me to make our home homier? And I'm thinking, why is she not snuggling with me? And it comes across as a deficiency in the feeling of love, even though we know the love is there. Of course, newlyweds are always a little bit wondering, is this love real? Will this love last?
She's hanging curtains. It's over. It's over.
But then I remembered, and this was before we ever read the love language book.
Right.
But I remember being at her house when we were engaged, and her father came into the kitchen where we were sitting and handed her car keys and says, Bertie, I put gas in your tank. And she just looks, the little stars of love were in her eyes. That's one of the ways that he showed love.
Right.
Both her parents did that, but there was not as much physical affection or verbal. And I grew up in a different house. It was you get hugs every day, and no service. No, once in a while. But
I'm hungry. Come, let me hug you.
Yes. Here, have a hug. It better be a Hershey's. But it's much more complicated than that. But one of the things I first teach people is, how do you teach each other how to love you?
Right.
One friend of mine, a colleague that tells the story on himself, that he would always bring his wife red roses for every romantic occasion. And one time, she did not look particularly thrilled. Mm. He probably just had some sort of a seminar where he talked about how much he and his wife loved each other. And he says, well, don't you like them? And she says, they're very pretty. He says, I'm not sensing full sincerity here.
Right.
And she says, well, let me ask you a question. What's my favorite color of roses? And he says, I don't know whether they got it right or not. And then she says, yellow. And I have told you this. But you were not listening. Well, I don't want you to quite that.
Oop.
Well, knowing her, I mean, she had that correct. They kind of had that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized, I've been giving her what I think is nice, but I'm not giving her what blesses her. And so I told him I could have helped him with that long ago. Forget the roses. My wife likes daffodils.
Right.
They are cheaper. But these are the things that we learn about each other. And so part of your role is teaching him and also empowering him to fulfill his responsibility to the family. Sometimes, especially in our era where women are always told that they are being oppressed. Well, maybe not always. You're looking surprised at that.
Well, you know me. I've been your student and your friend. So you know what side of the fence I'm on. Try it. No.
But really and truly, if you watch something on TV, it's all about, it's time for women to rise up and show their strength. Sure, you rose up years ago. Okay?
Right.
But they're always looking for, I don't want to be a doormat. But part of not being a doormat is teaching your husband who you are, what your needs are, what your preferences are, and also, how can I help you in the overwhelming job that you have, because the buck stops on your desk, of how to provide for and protect our family. And that's where the communication comes in. It's submission there is just letting him fulfill his role, but you don't become the house elf if you're a Harry Potter fan.
Right.
You're not Dobby the house elf where you do as you're told or you iron your hands.
Right.
But I think the other part of that also, though, is to learn what the husband needs. And what the husband needs to fulfill his role, but what the husband also needs to feel loved.
To feel loved, yes.
I think a lot of women, especially in this era, are being taught, going back to our whole Prince Charming thing, that the man is the one who is supposed to learn everything about her. What color flowers, and this, and that, and that, and that. But if you ask a representative sample of wives, and you ask them, what's your husband's favorite color? What's your husband's favorite food? What's your husband's favorite thing to do outside of certain activities.
Right. Yeah.
You're talking about disc golf, right?
Obviously. They would not know.
Mm-hmm.
They know what their favorite thing to do is, but they wouldn't know what their husband's.
I find it funny being in certain female groups of friendships that they'll ask us, we'll ask each other before we'll ask our husbands. Well, I ask because I want to really know. Just like when we bought our house, and I probably drove you up the wall with paint colors. But again, still being newlyweds, we're learning each other. What I wanted Daryl to understand is, yes, I may be the woman of the house, but you live here too. You've got to look at whatever color I throw on this wall, and it needs to bring you just as much peace as it brings me. And yellow may not be it for you, you know?
No,
so
it's not.
It's okay. What I had to learn about Daryl is he's not as specific as me, but I had to learn how to live in his range. He could tell me what he didn't like. Mm-hmm. Now, for a person with my personality, that's like beating around the bush. What do you like? You know, tell me what is your favorite color, or, you know, how do you see it? And he goes, I don't know. I trust you. And I'm going, wow. So going back and forth for a while, I finally decided I would bring him samples. I knew what colors not to bring, so eventually that information was helpful. So I stayed in a certain range, and I said, here we go, here are the options. I knew not to drag him from store to store. That is not his thing. That is not a language for Daryl.
No.
And tell me you did not bring him 10 different swatches.
I did not. That would have been overwhelming, so I realized that.
Do you like the egg or the ivory or the eggshell? Or
That one.
I think I did about four. I narrowed it down to 4.
And then I had to teach the lesson of don't ask me why. Which one do you like? I like that one. But why do you like that one? You asked me which one. I answer the question. Did you want to know which one I like? Yes. I like that one.
If you want to truncate that conversation, you say, well, let me tell you. When I was a lad.
Oh, wow.
And
I can do this.
I would just walk
dog story about how...
I would just leave the room.
This I could do. But we were just talking about that the other day. There's some things that we are not that specific on. Mm-hmm. But there are some things that we are. I don't know if you remember, I showed you that thing where wives and girlfriends were actually going to do the thing that their husbands like, go play basketball.
Oh, the video clip. Where they actually said, hey, hon, let's go do, and whatever it is the husband actually liked doing. Mm-hmm. And the expressions.
Joy.
Wow.
One of them, I think it was play a card game or something like that. And in 3 seconds, he left the room and came back with everything needed for the game. He was just that excited. And I was using that to show Cherie that as husbands, and a lot of times, we miss that. Because we're told to cater to our wives. We're told to take care of our wives. We're told to exercise that authority that puts them above us. And we do. But a lot of times wives are not necessarily always told to do the same.
No.
So there are 2 days I really, really did not like going to church. Mother's Day and Father's Day. Mother's Day, the pastor would get up and say, you ladies, you're doing an amazing job. You're out there making things happen. And fellas, you need to do better. Father's Day, the fellas, you guys are missing the mark. You guys need to do a whole lot better. And ladies, you're doing a great job.
Yes. Oh, the one I used to really not like is, which of you mothers has the most children? And she gets a carnation for each child.
Yeah.
If you did that on Father's Day, and a man says, well, I have 5 children, they're going to say, you've been tomcatting around the neighborhood. What's wrong with you?
Like, wait a minute.
Now, we got realistic enough at this church that we recognize those days. If we're going to give some little token, we give flowers to the women, we give donuts to the men, which is good. But you're right.
On that day, you have 12 children, right?
We really do not celebrate Hallmark holidays a whole lot in the church, but those are at-home celebrations. But you're right. Over the years, I've heard many more sermons, the blessedness of motherhood, and the why don't you get your act together sermons for fathers. You brute, what's wrong with you?
And I've told Cherie this, and she is totally oblivious to this. She said, no, I've never seen this.
I've never seen this, and there are things that Daryl has pointed out to me that I probably never would have paid attention to. Something as small as we're going through the store, the mall, and I would say, hey, why don't we go find something for you? Like, no need for me to be the only one carrying bags. Mm-hmm. Oh, why? There's nothing here for me. It's a whole mall. There's something here for you. And he says, have you paid attention to the size of the men's department in the stores? And I'm going, no, you got a men's department? Let's go. He was not kidding.
Okay, go to Governor Square. Here's your homework.
That's where we were.
Governor Square and do a count on how many repeated merchandising specialty places are there. For instance, is there one jewelry store?
No.
There are usually 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
How many shoe stores are there?
Yes.
And of those 15 or 20 shoe stores, how many carry men's shoes?
The athletic stores.
The athletic stores, yes.
So if I'm going to someone's wedding, that's where I'm going to go.
I don't know where
let me get this latest pair.
And you picture me going to places that says athletic on it. Okay, I have my standards.
Don't worry that we're out of time. Just come back and join us on next Monday as we continue the discussion. Have a wonderful week.